This week it's back to 1984 for a look at another of the all-time great Autobots. By popular demand, it's the basics on Wheeljack. The toy that would become Wheeljack was originally released as part of the Japanese Diaclone toy line in 1983, and was imported by Hasbro to become part of the first year of the Transformers line in 1984. Wheeljack transforms into a Lancia Stratos sports car, specifically a unique real-life rally car version of the Stratos, featuring green and red sponsor logos from the Italian airline Alitalia. Marvel Comics writer Bob Budiansky characterized Wheeljack as the mad scientist of the Autobots, a mechanical engineer who was always creating unusual new gadgets and weaponry in his lab, often injuring himself when things went wrong. Budiansky's profile also presented Wheeljack as the best driver among the Autobots, who loved to show off his stunt skills. But that aspect of his personality was never really displayed in the Generation 1 cartoon or the Marvel comic book. Wheeljack holds the distinction of being the first Transformer to appear on screen in the animated series, and he would go on to become one of the most frequently appearing Autobots in the show. While he never actually had a character-driven spotlight episode of his own, his crazy inventions saved the day almost as often as they caused trouble for his teammates. Whether it was the paralyzing immobilizer, which was stolen by the Decepticons, an anti-transfixation grenade that freed the Autobots after the Decepticons had trapped them in vehicle mode, or Dominator discs to control the Decepticon combiner Devastator, to name just a few. And that's without mentioning his most famous creations, the Dinobots, built together with his frequent collaborator Ratchet. Wheeljack's unique skill set ensured that he remained a prominent cast member right up to the end of the cartoon's second season, by which point the majority of the other characters from the 1984 lineup had drifted to the sidelines. But the discontinuation of his toy in 1986 led him to be killed off in the Transformers the movie. Wheeljack would return without explanation in the Japanese exclusive sequel series, 1989's Transformers Victory, helping Perceptor and Minerva rebuild the wounded Autobot god Jinrai into Victory Leo. In the 21st century, various pieces of Japanese media would eventually explain, in a rather circuitous, complicated way, that this was a Wheeljack who had crossed over from a parallel timeline, which had been created when our Wheeljack had attempted to alter the future and prevent his own death via time travel. As compared to the cartoon, Wheeljack wasn't such a major character in the early years of the Marvel comic book, but his scientific skills did come into play several times, perhaps most notably in the creation of the Combiner teams, the Aerialbots and the Protectobots. Curiously, it was only after his toy had been discontinued that he played his biggest role in the comic, when he became the primary voice of dissension during Grimlock's tyrannical rule of the Autobots, even calling in his old friend Skylynx to help him subvert the Dinobot commander's leadership. Wheeljack would eventually be phased out of the comic as well, but when his original toy was re-released in 1990 as part of the Classics range of reissues in Europe and Australasia, it led to his return in the pages of the UK version of the series as part of Grimlock's new Earth Force team. The same year, a non-transforming Action Master figure of him was also released, packaged with a turbo racer that converted from car to jet, inspiring his reappearance in the final few issues of the US series as well. Wheeljack was absent from Transformers for the remainder of the 1990s, with the first new incarnation of him debuting in 2002's Transformers Armada. But like most Armada characters who shared the names of classic bots, this new Wheeljack had nothing to do with the original. Designed to resemble Generation 1's Sideswipe, and armed with ninja-like powers that allowed him to cast illusions of himself and appear and disappear at will, Armada Wheeljack was a former Autobot who had once been friends with Hotshot back during the war on Cybertron, until the day that Wheeljack was pinned under some wreckage on the battlefield, and Hotshot was prevented by his fellow soldiers from risking his life to rescue him. Found and saved by Megatron, Wheeljack believed that Hotshot had abandoned him, and filled with resentment, joined the Decepticons. He came to Earth during the Armada cartoon to seek revenge on Hotshot, but old friendships died hard, and the two were eventually able to set their differences aside and joined forces once more against the threat of Unicron. The existence of Armada Wheeljack posed a problem in 2004 when Armada's sequel series, Transformers Energon, introduced a new Autobot who was clearly designed in homage to the original Wheeljack. But with the name already taken, this new Wheeljack-alike was instead named Downshift. Beyond looks, though, he had little in common with the original Wheeljack, characterized instead as a speedy, headstrong young Autobot known for rushing into trouble. In the Energon cartoon, he served under the elderly Autobot Bulkhead alongside fellow young warrior Cliffjumper. Downshift got a new toy in the third installment of the trilogy, Transformers Cybertron, and though he didn't show up in the Cybertron cartoon, the Cybertron comic, published by the Transformers Collectors Club, detailed how he was rebuilt into this new form after he was injured battling Nemesis Prime. Transformers Animated returned Wheeljack to his roots when he cameoed in the series in 2009, depicted as an impressively bearded engineer who worked with Perceptor on projects like the creation of Omega Supreme. The 2011 live-action movie, Dark of the Moon, kept this ball rolling. Unsurprisingly for the movies, its version of Wheeljack didn't look anything like the original, appearing instead as a kind of robotic Albert Einstein. But he retained his classic role of engineer and inventor, outfitting Sam Witwicky and the Autobots' other human allies with gadgets and weapons to help them fight the Decepticons. Though Wheeljack himself would die at the villain's hands soon after. While toys, comics, and video games referred to him as Wheeljack, and even featured alternate designs for the character that were based on the original, on screen he was instead named Q, in reference to the inventor from the James Bond films. That same year, the Transformers Prime series debuted its own version of Wheeljack, who was the inverse of the movie character, very faithfully based on the classic character's appearance, but with a totally different personality and function. Rather than an inventor, Prime Wheeljack was a gruff, sword-wielding warrior, a former member of the Autobot commando unit The Wreckers, whose dislike of rules, regulations, and authority figures had led him to quit the team after finding himself unable to tolerate the officious command style of its leader, Ultra Magnus. A loner by nature, he roamed the stars in his ship the Jackhammer. Once he came to Earth, he was reluctant to join his former Wrecker teammate Bulkhead on Optimus Prime's unit full-time, but he would drop in periodically to help them out when they needed it, and he got along well with Bulkhead's feisty human partner Miko Nakadai. In the show's third season, Wheeljack finally faced up to the personal issues behind his lone wolf persona, reconciling with Ultra Magnus, and forming a new Wreckers team alongside Magnus, Bulkhead, and Miko. Prime's decision to largely ignore Wheeljack's classic characterization was somewhat unusual, as it came at a point in time when Hasbro was in the habit of reconsolidating depictions of characters to be more consistent across different media. In this respect, Wheeljack lagged a little behind some of the other big-name Transformers characters, but as more and more new toys of him were steadily released, that consistency of both design and character eventually settled in. Proving his popularity, in 2012, he fended off serious competition to become the third ever character voted by fans into the Transformers Hall of Fame. In the years since, Wheeljack has remained a regular supporting character in IDW Publishing's comic books, putting his skills to work in pursuit of a better Cybertron by supporting Bumblebee and Starscream during their troubled leadership of the planet. And he recently went out a hero, sacrificing his life to activate the teleporter that saved the entire population of the planet Elonia from Unicron. The newest version of Wheeljack, seen in the Transformers Cyberverse animated series, remains true to the Generation 1 character, with the beard of his animated incarnation for good measure. And word is he'll also be putting in an appearance in the upcoming live-action Bumblebee movie. No doubt with a design much closer in appearance to his G1 self than he had in Dark of the Moon. Despite how popular he's proven himself to be, Wheeljack didn't win the 2018 fan poll that would have ensured him a new toy in the War for Cybertron Siege series. But given that the theme of the Siege line is Cybertronian alternate modes, and that Wheeljack was one of only a small handful of characters who had such a mode all the way back in the original cartoon, personally speaking, the chance to create a toy of that design is one I'd be surprised to see Hasbro pass up. And those are the basics on Wheeljack. Leave a comment below about your favorite incarnation of him or your favorite Wheeljack story, and hit those like and subscribe buttons while you're down there. Also, if you want to sponsor an episode of your own, keep an eye on Patreon where limited slots will be opening soon.